Welcome back to another episode of the Healthy with Heartland podcast. I am your host, Justin Freishtat, joined by your favorite creative directors, Simon and Shannon. How are you all doing this morning?
Good morning.
It's another Healthy Day with Heartland.
Sure is.
It's a super special day. Didn't you two just close on your house this morning?
We did.
Yes, we did.
Yes. We signed our life away, so to speak.
Sign.
Yep.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that means it went well?
Yes.
It went well. Yeah, everything went great. And you know what I mean? Like, I'd like to give a huge shout out, especially to the Heartland family, because I think that the knowledge that we received as far as like, you know, the financial education and just like the guidance that we've gotten from Jerry, Lisa, Justin, yourself, and just everyone here at the Heartland family has been awesome. And that's what actually kind of like led us to, you know, even having the opportunity to be able to do this. So I guess, I mean, it's pretty awesome to say that now we have a place that's pretty close by. We'll do some,
We're so excited.
We'll do some Heartland
close by.
What is that?
Heartland content?
No, definitely Heartland content, but like some Heartland happy hours.
Oh, Heartland happy hours.
Some
for
Heartland
sure.
happy hours. Yeah, definitely.
Those are in the future, I see.
Yep. But yeah, super excited.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
I'm super jealous of your commute.
Yeah. We cut it from
it would be so different. Oh my gosh, we cut it. Oh my gosh, from an hour, almost an hour and a half, down to like 15 minutes.
Yeah, we don't have to deal with the Beltway now. So
yes, goodbye, Tyson's Corner.
I'm gonna put a little.
Oh, just a little.
Yes. Beltway traffic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So today, topic, we're going to talk about the segmentation of agriculture. Lots of things to talk about there. But before we get into that, let's get over to Simon and Shannon for those announcements.
Perfect. All right, Heartland family, welcome back. We're going to have an amazing reorder special that I want to mention for you guys this month. And there's still a few more weeks that you can take advantage of it. So we have the Heartland turkey. It's a whole turkey that you can get included with your reorder absolutely free. So make sure to take advantage of that. If you are not following us on YouTube, if you're not following us on Instagram, make sure you check us out there, as well as on Facebook. For those of you who follow us, I'm sure you've seen our Heartland Foodies group. Please join in on that. Lots of good content. We'd love to hear what you're eating for dinner. People post recipes, techniques, tricks, and of course, all the awesome things that they're getting on their reorders. So we'd love to have you there.
And Shannon, if I can, if you know of anyone that they think is on the fence about Heartland Foods, make sure they join the Heartland Foodies. There's a lot of great content in there. And, you know, it's one of those places that, you know, if people don't even know who we are or what we do, this is, I mean, obviously, because we don't have the huge marketing budgets and the huge football field, grocery stores and things like that. We're still a small family-owned company, so you can come and check us out at the Foodies group, get all the content there, engage with not only us, but our customers as well. It's a great place. It's a great community. The ultimate Foodies community.
Yes, and we all love seeing the awesome foodie posts, and we love hearing, you know, of course, the things that you guys love most about Heartland Foods and how we can improve all the awesome things that we're doing here. Another awesome reason to point that out is that we're going to do a 5K giveaway. So when we reach 5,000 members in the group, we're going to do $2,000 of Heartland Farm Source products absolutely free. So all you have to do is just invite 5 friends to the foodie group and then post on this post. You'll see that's pinned to the top of the page. Say that I've invited my 5 and you'll be entered in to win that $2,000 worth of farm source products. So definitely check that out. Just a couple more mentions here. Heartland family, stick with me. We do have some pop-up events. There are still a few spots open for October and November. If you guys are interested, you can go to heartlandfoods.com/host. That's a really great opportunity to get involved with your community. Of course, any referrals that come from that event would be counted for you. So it's a really awesome opportunity, and we love to mention that. So if you're interested, get in touch with us on Facebook, or like I mentioned, heartlandfoods.com/post. And with that, we can get into the podcast.
All right. So the segmentation of agriculture. So this has been a process that's really been happening since the Industrial Revolution, all the way back to the 1800s. So it wasn't really what people think in recent problems with the chemicals and all the technology. It really started when we developed tools like the plow and tilling machines, things like that, which happened way back in the 1800s. So that's when things started to segment. In other words, we used to raise things in a regenerative cycle. If you go back and read Thomas Jefferson's journals, you can learn a lot about how things were farmed, before things got industrialized. And that's really what we need to do, is go back to the way things were done way back when to revive our planet. So we're going to get into all the different segmentations. Simon and Shannon, where should we start with this?
You mentioned I guess some of the things like the plow, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess some of these tools that, I guess that's where we can kind of start is why did this all kind of happen? Like what was the idea behind the, segmentation aspect of it, and why did they start using these plows and start tilling and doing those kind of things?
And Justin, maybe we touched on it last week, but maybe you could go into a little bit about, the background about like what segmentation is for those people who don't really understand it.
Right.
Yeah, so segmentation is basically, instead of being a ecosystem, a farm where everything is raised in one place and every part of the ecosystem, plants, microorganisms, trees, vines, animals, that whole thing feeds off each other, right? Every part of that ecosystem needs the other parts to basically feed, regenerate, and keep the topsoil nutrient dense for the animals that are going to eat the plants that grow there, and the food that we need as humans, whether you're growing apple trees or we've got a cornfield or grasslands for the ruminant animals. So basically, for profitability and for segmentation, every piece of the farming that used to be done in a regenerative cycle got segmented into its own industry. And with doing that, created all of these other industries. So for instance, when you don't have everything in one place, now you need a transportation industry to move these products from place to place. So we're disrupting the natural cycle of farming. That's really kind of where it starts.
Right. Wow. And so I guess, in the event, trying to make things bigger, essentially faster, right? So they started using these tools really to accelerate the process.
Like revolutionary, right? But what it sounds like is the regular circle of life, kind of like all the things that Justin mentioned are supposed to be working together for the greater good of the ecosystem. It's being disrupted by, it could be, I guess, a numerous amount of things within the segmentation, right? Transportation was just one of the things that, that you mentioned, but I assume it could be more than just that.
Definitely. No, definitely. And when you look at, Justin mentioned transportation, you start to think of like, you see the different, trucks, these 18-wheelers and these kind of things, and they're making all these products and these farms, and they're making all these things faster, essentially, and trying to get it out there, to the masses as quickly as possible. So I think, a lot of times, like, we talk about, how these things are negative. I think that it started off as a positive, though, right? Like, it started off trying to feed people quicker, but then it turned, and like most things, right? You either die as the hero or live to see yourself become the villain, right? Like, you start off with these great ideas and intentions, and then from that, it turned into, this process of cutting corners or not doing. I mean, when you look at regenerative agriculture, I mean, you see it's like, it's the right way, right? I mean, it's the only way, and it should be that way. That's the way they were doing it before, and then somehow along, the Industrial Revolution, we changed it.
That brings up a really good point, and it leads me to, I guess, ask the question. And Justin, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming it has to do with something with like money. Obviously, they're making money from it. It's I mean, I know there's things with subsidies, stuff like that. So the root of the issue sounds like it could be, money, profit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think, Justin?
And efficiency for a big company that is not a farmer, right? They don't train farmers, and now we don't have very many farmers in this country. We have people that are trained to execute a big agriculture system, which is not farming. So there's two pieces of this. It was the Industrial Revolution of tools, tilling, but the biggest transition actually was when the chemicals, the herbicides, insecticides, and pesticides were developed. And one thing that people don't know, there's a very dark history with the origins of pesticides. Glyphosate and all these things that are being used now were actually developed by the Germans during World War II, and they were used in the gas chambers. So those chemicals that were developed for warfare were then, after the war, reused and repurposed for industrial farming. It's very dark history.
Wow. I did not know that.
Neither did I. I mean, when I mentioned, earlier that I assumed it was, multiple different things, I thought that it had probably something to do with that, but I had no clue that it went back, that far.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense though. You think about it. Like now you talk to farmers who were using those things, and 30 years later, they're dealing with all kinds of different cancers and, you know what I mean? Things like that. Like, it's not a good thing.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. The development of glyphosate is probably the worst thing to ever happen to our land and our people, because what it allows a big agriculture farm to do is to raise one thing. Again, segmentation, right? We're going to raise one thing, whether it be corn, soybeans, and we're using a GMO plant or seed, right, to grow it that's resistant to the glyphosate. That's the only reason why a GMO is bad. Right. So they are essentially spraying these fields with the glyphosate pesticide that is going to kill everything except for what they're growing, that GMO product. And then we're going to ingest those foods, or the animals that we eat ingest those foods that are covered in glyphosate and directly linked to cancer and all of these problems. You know, when you ingest glyphosate, it does the exact same thing. It kills your gut microbiome the same way that it kills everything that's growing in a field except for the GMO. And theoretically, the only way that glyphosate would be safe for a human is if we were GMOs that were resistant to the glyphosate.
Right.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then you think about, you know, how many products, like you said, that has involvement in, and then
it's the
even if you're trying to protect yourself, it could be even the farm animals or the agriculture, and that's being affected, and you could or could not even know.
Because how can you tell?
Right.
How can you tell? You know, I mean, of course they say
non-GMO or GMO, but I mean, really, you know, down to the root.
But even, you know, when you just mentioned pesticides, there's organic pesticides.
Correct.
As well.
Yeah, and Justin touched on that last week. It's like arsenic's an organic compound, right?
So you have...
Doesn't mean you want to eat it.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I mean, but you know, our bodies are designed to handle a certain amount of toxic load. You know, arsenic is present in a lot of things. It's in brown rice. You know, so your body is going to be in contact with chemicals and toxins, and we can filter out a certain amount of it. But the problem becomes when we have glyphosate that gets into the water cycle. It gets into the aquifers in the ground, and then it ends up in our water, in our air. The toxic load that is on people today is very hard to measure. And when you look at the cancer rates and all the health issues that we're dealing with as a society, it's very obvious where the problem is, but we can't quantify and measure the big impact because it's coming at us from all angles. This is why it's not just the food, right? You have to take care of your air, your water. The air is the hardest one, and so is the water, because you can't see this stuff. I mean, how are you going to know if the furniture you just bought that came from China is off-gassing a bunch of chemicals into the air in your house? You know, as home building technology, you just got a new home, right?
I know.
The efficiency of a home is tighter and better than ever. It's good for energy efficiency, but it's keeping your indoor air quality even more contained. So it's more dangerous than ever to be living at an in-home environment. And during this pandemic, everyone's staying at home. We're spending more time inside than ever. No one's filtering their water or air. And it's extremely dangerous to put that toxic load on your system.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know that's something we've definitely thought about is, you know, it's almost like the new car smell too. I've heard things about that. Like when you get a new car or a new house or something like that, like you enjoy that sort of smell that's there, but it's so toxic for you that if you're breathing it in all the time, you know what I mean? You're doing, like you said, like it's about limiting that toxic load.
Yeah.
So I know that's something we've been really thinking about, and
definitely,
you know, would probably, you know, are probably going to do something about it and getting some of those like air filters and things like that, because it's important.
Investing in your health, right?
It's huge.
And we always talk about it. It's air, water, sleep, like food. Those are the main things.
Yep.
You know, and then like just more specifically, like about the podcast topic we're talking about, you know, this morning, like with like food just in general, you know, like it's scary. Just what I'm learning from what, you know, Justin's mentioned, that it's pretty much everywhere. And it's not only just in the food, and it's not only just in the products that, you know, we're filling grocery stores with, but it's also in the water supply, and it's also, you know, in your air. And wow, it's just really intense.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The more and more synthetic products that we make as technology gets better, the more we're exposed to these things. It's like, you know, the water thing is just the biggest mind-blowing thing to me, but people don't know. I mean, you walk around all day, you see people with bottled water in their hands and plastics.
Yeah.
The microplastics that you ingest from drinking bottled water have serious consequences on your body. And if it has BPA in it, BPA is essentially synthetic estrogen. It's directly linked to infertility. When you see with women in specific, when they drink a lot of bottled water and they have if you have that inner tube problem around your waist and fats collecting there, that's because of the estrogenic effects of microplastics that you're ingesting. So making a small choice, like going to, either a glass or a metal bottle instead of drinking bottled water, could have a massive difference on the amount of toxins you're exposing yourself to. So there's a lot of things you can do to start cleaning out the exposure that you have to this stuff.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's those things that you don't necessarily realize in your day-to-day, everyday life that, are essentially creating an extra toxic load, creating that toxic load. So you could be doing things you think are right and then really be missing the ball on your air, your water, your sleep, those kind of things. So it's very eye-opening, and it's something that, like if you're not aware of it, it's definitely something you should, be considering and be paying attention to, because it's everywhere.
And we'll keep talking about it. So if you'd like to learn, tune in.
Right. I know. I feel like our conversations always head the same way every week, and it's like, but it's just the most important thing that people don't know, they don't understand, and we got to get that message out.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, that's true.
So anyways, what were we talking about? The segmentation of agriculture?
Segmentation, right.
I guess back to segmentation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there were those, I guess we were talking about, the tools and tilling and how we were ruining the land. And I remember when we were talking to Matt Mayer, the one thing he mentioned as well was like, I think it takes like something like over 20 years, or it was some crazy amount of years.
I think it's like 70.
70 years, right?
A number.
Right. Yeah. It's some high number for the soil to regenerate. So it's like, if we keep doing this around the country and around even the world for that matter, pretty soon there will be no good soil to be growing products. You know what I mean? We'll have ruined everything.
Well, there's kind of like a cycle where, you're like, I think, Justin, you started talking about it last week, where you're going through it, you're using the soil, right? And then like you're only growing one crop, so it's being depleted of all those specific nutrients. Then you're going to till it again and do it again the next season, and then you're going to do it again the next year, and you can do it for 10 years, and then you think that soil is going to have, nutrients to grow a different crop, or even the same one for that matter.
Yeah. And
the biggest problem with that is without the presence of healthy topsoil, it's degrading and degrading and degrading, and then they keep tilling it, right? And to reuse it. But the problem is without a healthy layer of topsoil, the farm becomes very delicate. The crops become delicate. Without deep roots and topsoil to hold rainwater, it's very easy to have runoff issues, right? And that's what ends up happening to all of these farms eventually. It's a hailstorm, it's a bad rainstorm, it's a flood, and the farm can't withstand nature's wrath because it doesn't have strong topsoil. And then you essentially run off the whole thing, and the land desertifies. And at that point, it's over, right? That's when it's going to take, you mentioned decades to revive that land. But as Matt said, if you bring in the presence of ruminant animals onto that land, you'll accelerate that process. I believe he said to 7 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy because, and it's not just, correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, it's not just like the soil. It's like you said, like the bacteria that live there, and then it's like the worms, and then it's like the roots, and then it's like the moss that grows, and it's a combination of all those things. It's not just, it's just the soil itself. It's a combination of all those things.
Yeah, it's what the topsoil holds, which is billions and billions of microbes that feed those roots, right? And they were fed by the ruminant animals that manured there, and their saliva and their hooves trample it and basically create that beautiful miracle grow for the land to revive itself. And the best part about that whole process is lush land doesn't reflect light, so it cools, right? But when that runoff happens and it desertifies, now all of the sunlight is being reflected and it's heating, right? So the sun is naturally going to heat our atmosphere if we do not have grassland ground cover. So it's a double whammy. It's not just, oh, the cows fart and like we burn fossil fuels. No, the land is desertifying and giving off and creating more heat that way. So we have to revive the grasslands and the ground cover so that not only we stop reflecting this heat, but the rain cycle can continue, right? If you got no rain, you got a desert. I mean, this is like layer over layer over layer of just heat that's piling onto the planet.
That's,
I mean, that sounds scary. It's like, I mean, and then once it becomes like that desertous, biome, then, I mean, there's no turning back, right?
No,
I mean, like
that's a real food desert.
Wow.
I mean, you think about places they talk about food deserts where there's, really no grocery stores or anything, but imagine
a
grocery stores
can't grow anything.
won't have anything. You want anything to stock if there's no soil and no land that we can farm.
Wow.
So, yeah.
But this is why regenerative agriculture is the most important thing in terms of climate change. Like if we actually care as a world that we want to solve this issue, whether you believe in it hardcore or not, the efforts are misplaced, because not only will we stop the desertifying, but the more grasslands and more plants that there are, the more CO2 is being sucked back down into the earth. But every time we till land, we're releasing the carbon that the plants that were once there have stored back into the earth. So it's just like a layer after layer after layer of damage that's all taking place because of one system. So if we break the big agriculture machine and turn to regenerative, watch Kiss the Ground. Literally the entire legacy carbon load that started building in the 1800s from when the tilling began, that entire process can reverse, and the legacy carbon load can literally be depleted back to what it was in the 1800s within our lifetime.
I mean, that's insane. It's just like, why aren't more people jumping on that? Do you think that it's just because they're not really aware, like that this is the way that we could be doing things, or do you think that there's something that's stopping this information from coming out there? Like, I don't know. I know that it has to do with the people that are not supporting regenerative agriculture. They're making money, right?
Yeah,
I think that's the system's too big, and the incentives are in all the wrong places, and you would need some serious changes in legislation, and you need all the countries around the world to get together. I mean, it almost happened in 2015. And I don't want to say it almost happened. It did happen in 2015. There are a lot of countries that are executing on this right now. It is happening. It's just the biggest problem countries, the US, China, and India, those three countries did not sign on to this agreement in 2015.
Wow. Yeah.
They didn't do it. And that just says it all right there. So with the solutions there, the evidence is there, the governments are aware of it, and the subsidies and the lobbying and big agriculture, I guess, just has too big of an influence to fix the problem at this point.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, do you think that it is because, I mean, like when you talk about China, you talk about the U.S. and you talk about India, I mean, we have I mean, of course, China, the largest growing population and stuff like that. Do you think that, like the U.S. we're already in too deep? You know what I mean? Like we're like all of the subsidies and the things that we have, like.
Well, I think like he kind of just answered that when now we're at the point where it has to be legislative. It has to be UN, like the UN, like it almost, it has to be like almost that intense, because I was taking it to the level of, like industries making money. And is there some way that, with Americans I mean, I don't know, like
taxes
them using, well, I don't know. Anything, but I think like Justin said, it's so far gone now that it's going to take something huge in order to turn it around drastically to get to where we need to be.
Yeah. Well, here's a question.
Well, we could do it.
Yeah.
Like, so if you look at where the incentives are right now, everything is being pushed towards electric vehicles, right?
Right.
So, Tesla led the charge on that, and you got all these startups, and now the big companies, GM, Ford, they're all moving towards electric vehicles because that's where the government's incentives are.
Right.
But I just think it's not a bad thing what they're doing, but the better thing would be to put the pressure and the subsidies and the change and the legislation behind the big agriculture companies in this country to start moving in that direction. This would mean banning glyphosate. The biggest problem would be the education, the re-education of the actual farmers that do the work. That's the biggest challenge here, because they need to be taught how to be farmers again.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. And it's sad when you kind of mention it, because that's one of those things where like that's generational. Like most of the time it's passed down from family to family.
It was that way.
And like you said, those are trades, those are secrets, those are, family kind of things that you're sharing. And then that was kind of lost. The art of that was kind of lost.
Yeah. And I think it has a lot to do with the way the process was holding out, because you talk to a lot of these families, you see a lot of these families that did have generations of farmers, and some of them are no longer doing that because they've seen
because there was the change.
Because there was the change, and there was also the lasting effects of the glyphosate of those things. Like as it went on, they started to see, like Matt Mayers was one of them. He even said his family was affected by the glyphosate and the cancers and that kind of stuff. Right. And I mean, he's still in it, but he's totally flipped the script. And I feel like if there's more farmers out there that do that, like Justin is saying, going out and getting that education. And I think it's upon the people too. The people, I think we have to vote that way. We have to take it to legislation. We have to make it a priority for the government to be able to be like, okay, because I mean that's essentially what happened with the cars, right? With electric vehicles. I think more people just started to hop on that and started to support it, and it became a thing. So I think that as people start to get educated on not only the food they're eating, but on how that food is actually grown. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions, and that's why I asked Matt on the podcast as well. I was like, hey, do we even have the opportunity to feed all these people doing it the regenerative way? Because I think that's an argument that a lot of people have. They're going to be like, we have to do it this way. You know what I mean? Like we have to do it this way. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that, and he even mentioned that isn't the solution, that there is, if we do get more farmers and we do have more people doing this regenerative agriculture, we can feed the masses. And not only that, but like Justin's saying, we can help the earth out. We'll have, like the soil. It's better for the soil. It's better for everything. And I don't think
the subsidy would have to change.
Right.
So, and here's the shift, right? Because they're right now, if you're a farmer and you've gone down that road and you're relying on the government, basically they've indoctrinated you into that farmer welfare where, hey, my land is not that healthy. I'm raising for big ag. If I do lose my crop this year, the government's guaranteeing me a certain income. That is where the subsidies are right now. What we would have to do is say, okay, we're all switching to regenerative farming, and while we regenerate your land, because it's going to take some time, we're going to guarantee that same income. Because a farmer is not going to ruin his family's livelihood to switch to a regenerative concept. But the reality is that if this did take place, they would go from 3 to 5 cents an acre profitability to $100 an acre profitability. Wow. The opportunity is huge.
Yeah. Wow. And I think it's, farming is one of those things that if it's not part of your family and wasn't, it's not a generational thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the statistics on this. I could be, totally incorrect, but I don't think it's one of those industries that a lot of people are, it's not one of the
growing.
Yeah, one of the ones that is growing that people are really interested in doing. You know what I mean? I think you have to battle now technology as well, right? So we have all this, like the new apps, and people are doing a lot of cybersecurity and things like that. Like people are really wanting to.
Maybe there's not as much of a draw to go into that industry.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know if that's true or not, but it would seem as such, just because there are so few of people doing it the right way, the way that we're talking about it.
Right.
I don't know.
And
it's an interesting point.
Yeah. And do you all think that, even like in terms of farming, do you think it's looked at as, like a one of like not a how would I don't know how to I would phrase it, but just not like one of those jobs that's like, like high paying, like people aren't I mean, you would get more from it because you're saving the world, but I don't think that like,
they don't think it'll be lucrative.
Lucrative, yeah, exactly. Do you think
I don't know
that people think that way? I mean, in your opinion.
Well, I mean, I don't know for sure, but what I know is what Justin kind of just told us, and that like they're not doing extremely well. Like the reason that they have these programs in place is because they, became part of this essentially welfare, right, with farming. And then if for some reason they don't end up getting their crops, if a storm happens, whatever, like what could be whatever, natural disaster, they're still guaranteed that like small amount. But correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, it's not like a great living like wage. It's just enough to get by so that probably they can do it again for them next season,
Exactly. And it's very complicated, right? Because it's different for everything. Like imagine that you're the person on the Eastern Shore who's raising chickens for Mount Air or
Mm-hmm.
Purdue or Tyson. You are paid based off the total feed control concept, you
Right.
know. How fast can I grow these chickens in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of feed?
Mm-hmm.
And you are living and dying by how fast and profitable you can turn that barn over. I
Yeah.
mean, these are and it's a ton of people in this country. Like we have a lot of farmers. I mean, I would
Mm-hmm.
call them farmers, whether you're raising chickens or livestock that gets sold to the feedlot,
Right.
or you're raising GMO corn, or whatever it is. I mean, we have.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would love to know what the number is. How many
Yeah.
Americans are part of this big agricultural farming system at the bottom that are literally being trampled on by these publicly traded conglomerates?
Mm.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really sad when you put it like that.
It says in the most recent survey there were 2.02 million U.S. farmers in 2020.
And that's just total U.S. farmers.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's
So it's
pretty
A lot of people.
2.02 million, and then that's down from 2.20 million in 2007.
Wow.
So the number is going down. So there's even
There's
less
been a
farmers
reduction.
now.
Wow.
And
Which
think
is
about it.
scary.
Like all those farmers have families, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who are part of this that their livelihoods rely on the big ag system just to
Yeah.
survive. So it would take massive legislation and moving the subsidies to make a massive change. And you could make the argument that this is everything right here. In this country, you ready for this? This is an
Mm-hmm.
incredible stat. We spend $4 trillion a year on healthcare. Okay? 4 trillion spent on healthcare. If we invested a bunch of money, even if it was $1 trillion to make this change, what would the healthcare
Mm.
cost reduction be
Mm.
on the back end of it? We want to talk about things that pay for themselves.
Yeah.
That would do it. But again, it's very complicated. That's not good for the cancer companies.
That's where I was gonna go with it right after you were gonna say. I was gonna say, but that's also that's not good for the insulin
Pharma.
companies that are providing all the insulin for all the diabetics. Like it's not good for a lot of these pharmaceutical companies because we won't need them anymore.
That's
Yeah, so that's what we're up against is a
It's
$4
about-
trillion annual spend.
Right.
wow. Yeah, that's intense.
But I'm ready for it. You know what I mean? I'm ready for it.
We're
It's
calling
like,
for it.
Let's do it. Like why not? What's the alternative when you think about it?
Right. Because it's just getting worse and worse.
Don't put the word out. Don't do the research. Don't do the education. Don't change your life. What's going to happen? We know. You know what I mean?
Well, the soil's being depleted either way. So
Either
you
way.
can either, hop on one side of the fence and help to try to make it better, or it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse.
And the thing is, you might as well hop on now because it's not really us that's going to, I mean, it could be us in our lifetime that's affected,
Yeah.
but it's the generations after us.
That's true as
If
well.
if the soil keeps going the way that it's going and we really turn into like a food desert where you can't even grow food.
Yeah.
I mean, like what will the next generations eat other than processed
We're talking
food?
about
Like,
going to the store and reading the ingredients. There
Right.
may be no ingredients to even read.
or none of it will be real.
Yeah.
Their
It's true.
solution is grow it in a lab, use
Yeah.
technology to make fake food.
Yep.
I just don't agree with it. But
No way.
I mean, on the positive side of things, it really is incredible what Matt Meyer is leading. I mean, his
Yeah.
coalition of farmers are up to 300,000 acres
Mm.
that have been converted from GMO cornfields to grasslands, where they are holistically managing regenerative farms. And
Wow.
they're going to get 1 million acres done by 2025. And that's extremely positive.
That's
Wow.
huge.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's huge. I mean, that's awesome that, I mean, there's someone out there that is at least, at the forefront of this, trying to get the word out there, trying to gain
Like you
farmers
said,
and get
he
people.
experienced it firsthand. It is
Oh,
his
absolutely.
life. It's he comes from a generation, like generations of farmers, and they experience these things that we're talking about. So, it's real life, and people's lives and families are affected, and it's great to hear how successful they are now, and all the things that they're doing to kind of help out.
Yep.
Well, I just love that he beat the glyphosate cancer and then led this whole movement. I mean, he's the chief renegade,
That's right.
regenerative renegade at Thousand Hills. But like he says, we're regenerative renegades because we are helping get the product out there. I mean, we sell it Thousand Hills beef at Heartland Foods. And every single person that shops with us, you are a regenerative renegade too.
Right.
Definitely. Really bomb for that.
Drop the bomb for them.
Well, I feel like we could keep talking about this all day. I mean, I feel, Justin, is there anything that we kind of skimmed over?
Yeah, I mean, getting back to the original point, I mean, just to kind of close out the segmentation, when we used to have, let's just hit the cows thing. This war against cows is just a huge problem and a misconception. We had cows on a regenerative farm, like the way Matt's raising them, right? Their manure, I'm going to say this again like I did earlier, the manure feeds the microorganisms that feed the plants, that grow back, that the animals will come back in and eat. When we segment the industry and we're growing corn here to feed animals over here, we are taking from the earth and giving nothing back.
Wow.
And it's a double net negative.
Wow.
Regenerative agriculture, holistically managed land, is net negative carbon. So don't tell me that the cows are the problem.
Drop the bomb for that. It's true.
And that's my final message for today.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate everyone tuning in. If there's anything that you'd like us to cover on the podcast, please drop it in the comment section below. And if you missed today's live episode, you can definitely check it out on YouTube, or you can check us out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts if you'd like to check us out at another time. And with that, we'll see you next week. And Justin, with that, you can go ahead and send us off.
Alrighty. Next week, same time, 12 p.m. Ooh, wait, is it going to be the same time?
Yes. Next week's going to be the same time. And then heading into November, we'll do an official announcement, but we're going to be moving back to 9:30 a.m.
And it's next week.
Next week, we're going to have a special guest. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. Stay tuned for a post. I'm going to send something out beginning of next week. So it's going to be a secret until then, but you're not going to want to miss it.
I heard he has a belt.
Ooh.
Hey.
Can't wait. All right. So until next week, stay healthy with Heartland.